Memory and evaluation. There is debate over whether Napoleon was an enlightened despot who laid the foundations of modern Europe, or a megalomaniac who wrought greater misery than any man before the coming of Hitler. He was compared to Adolf Hitler by Peter Gale in 1947 and Claude Rib in 2005. Most modern critics of Napoleon, however, reject the Hitler comparison, arguing that Napoleon did not commit genocide and did not engage in the mass murder and imprisonment of his political opponents. Nevertheless, Bell and Macklin condemn his killing of 3,000 to 5,000 Turkish prisoners of war in Syria. A number of historians have argued that his expansionist foreign policy was a major factor in the Napoleonic Wars, which cost 6 million lives and caused economic disruption for a generation. Macklin and Barnett suggest that Napoleon's reputation as a military genius is exaggerated. Cobbin and Connor argue that Napoleon had insufficient regard for the lives of his soldiers and that his battle tactics led to excessive casualties. Critics also cite Napoleon's exploitation of conquered territories. To finance his wars, Napoleon increased taxes and levies of troops from annexed territories and satellite states. He also introduced discriminatory tariff policies which promoted French trade at the expense of allies and satellite states. He institutionalized plunder. French museums contain art stolen by Napoleon's forces from across Europe. Artifacts were brought to the Musée du Louvre for a Grand Central Museum, an example which would later be followed by others. Many historians have criticized Napoleon's authoritarian rule, especially after 1807, which included censorship, the closure of independent newspapers, the bypassing of direct elections and representative government, the dismissal of judges showing independence, and the exile of critics of the regime. Historians also blame Napoleon for reducing the civil rights of women, children, and people of color, and reintroducing the legal penalties of civil death and confiscation of property. His reintroduction of a hereditary monarchy and nobility remains controversial. His role in the Haitian Revolution and decision to reinstate slavery in France's colonies in the Caribbean and Indian Ocean adversely affect his reputation. Propaganda and memory. Napoleon's use of propaganda contributed to his rise to power, legitimated his regime, and established his image for posterity. Strict censorship and control of the press, books, theater, and art were part of his propaganda scheme, aimed at portraying him as bringing peace and stability to France. Propaganda focused on his role first as a general, then as a civil leader and emperor. He fostered a relationship with artists, commissioning and controlling different forms of art to suit his propaganda goals. Napoleonic propaganda survived his exile to St. Helena. Las Cases, who was with Napoleon in exile, published the Memorial of St. Helena in 1822, creating a legend of Napoleon as a liberal, visionary proponent of European unification, deposed by reactionary elements of the Ancien regime. Napoleon remained a central figure in the Romantic art and literature of the 1820s and 1830s. The Napoleonic legend played a key role in collective political defiance of the Bourbon Restoration monarchy in 1815 to 1830. People from different walks of life and areas of France, particularly Napoleonic veterans, drew on the Napoleonic legacy and its connections with the ideals of the 1789 Revolution. The defiance manifested itself in seditious materials, displaying the tricolor and rosettes. There were also subversive activities celebrating anniversaries of Napoleon's life and reign and disrupting royal celebrations. Bell sees the return of Napoleon's remains to France in 1840 as an attempt by Louis Philippe to prop up his unpopular regime by associating it with Napoleon, and that the regime of Napoleon III was only possible due to the continued resonance of the Napoleonic legend. Venita Dutta argues that following the collapse of militaristic Boulangism in the late 1880s, the Napoleonic legend was divorced from party politics and revived in popular culture. Writers and critics of the Belle Époque exploited the Napoleonic legend for diverse political and cultural ends. In the 21st century, Napoleon appears regularly in popular fiction, drama, and advertising. Napoleon and his era remain major topics of historical research with a sharp increase in historical books, articles, and symposia during the bicentenary years of 1999 to 2015. Long-term influence outside France. Napoleon was responsible for spreading many of the values of the French Revolution to other countries, especially through the Napoleonic Code. After the fall of Napoleon, it continued to influence the law in Western Europe and other parts of the world, including Latin America, the Dominican Republic, Louisiana, and Quebec. Napoleon's regime abolished remnants of feudalism in the lands he conquered and in his satellite states. He liberalized property laws, ended manorialism, abolished the Guild of Merchants and Craftsmen to facilitate entrepreneurship, legalized divorce, closed the Jewish ghettos, and ended the Spanish Inquisition. The power of church courts and religious authority was sharply reduced and equality before the law was proclaimed for all men. Napoleon reorganized what had been the Holy Roman Empire, made up of about 300 kleinstaaterii, into a more streamlined 40-state confederation of the Rhine. This helped promote the German Confederation and the unification of Germany in 1871, as it sparked a new wave of German nationalism that opposed the French intervention. The movement toward Italian unification was similarly sparked by Napoleonic rule. These changes contributed to the development of nationalism and the nation-state. The Napoleonic invasion of Spain and ousting of the Spanish Bourbon monarchy had a significant impact on Spanish America. Many local elites sought to rule in the name of Ferdinand VII of Spain, whom they considered the legitimate monarch. Napoleon indirectly began the process of Latin American independence when the power vacuum was filled by local political leaders such as Simón Bolívar and José de San Martín. Such leaders embraced nationalistic sentiments influenced by French nationalism and led successful independence movements in Latin America. Napoleon's reputation is generally favorable in Poland, which is the only country in the world to evoke him in its national anthem. Poland is not yet lost.